Mark Reynolds and Sarah Thompson never imagined their city would become ground zero in a deadly battle between ruthless drug cartels and corrupt cops. But as the cocaine flooded Liverpool streets, their fight to uncover the truth would expose secrets darker than anyone could have guessed. Secrets that threatened to tear the city apart from within. Liverpool, with its iconic docks and rich maritime history, has always been a city of movement and trade. For centuries, ships have arrived and departed from its bustling port, bringing goods from across the world. What many don't realize is that this very history and infrastructure made Liverpool a perfect location for something far more sinister. Beneath the surface of its cobbled streets and old warehouses, a hidden world of crime was quietly taking root. In the late 20th century, Liverpool's port was no longer just a place for legitimate goods to pass through. Its vast, sprawling docks, with countless containers and minimal supervision, became an ideal entry point for smuggling operations. Among the various illegal trades, cocaine was the most valuable and dangerous commodity. Large shipments of cocaine began arriving from South America, concealed in shipping containers alongside legal cargo. The sheer size and complexity of the port made it nearly impossible for law enforcement to thoroughly inspect every container, creating gaps that smugglers exploited with ease. This transformation wasn't sudden but gradual. The city's economic struggles had left many desperate for work, and vulnerable to the influence of criminal groups, promising quick money and power. Old neighborhoods, once vibrant with families and workers, became battlegrounds where gangs fought to control the drug trade. The streets that were once filled with merchants and dock workers now echoed with the sounds of violence and fear. Liverpool's role as a gateway for cocaine also reflected the growing global reach of South American drug cartels. These powerful organizations were constantly seeking new routes to get their product into Europe, and Liverpool's docks fit the bill perfectly. The city's strategic location on the west coast of England allowed traffickers to move their shipments quickly to other parts of the UK and beyond. As the port's reputation changed, so did the challenges facing law enforcement. Police forces found themselves outmatched by criminals who were well-funded, well-organized, and increasingly violent. The city's historic streets had become a front line in a global drug war, a battleground that few outside Liverpool fully understood, at least not yet. By the late 1990s, the landscape of international drug trafficking was shifting dramatically. South American cartels, once confined largely to their home territories, were expanding aggressively into Europe. Their cocaine, in high demand across the continent, needed new, reliable routes to reach buyers. Liverpool, with its vast port and long history as a trading hub, quickly became an ideal target. The city's docks offered a convenient entry point into the UK, providing a gateway for cocaine to flood markets across the country and beyond. The cartels did not simply send their shipments and hope for the best. They established intricate networks to control the entire process, from arrival at the port to distribution on the streets. This involved forging alliances with local criminal groups who knew the city's streets and underground. These groups acted as middlemen, ensuring the cocaine was moved swiftly and safely from the docks to hidden warehouses and then out into the neighborhoods. The organization behind the smuggling was sophisticated. Containers arriving at Liverpool's docks were carefully inspected by the cartel's own agents, who used advanced methods to hide the cocaine inside legitimate shipments, everything from fruit to machinery. By the time the containers were cleared by port authorities, the drugs were already inside the city, ready to be distributed. As the cartels gained influence, their presence in Liverpool grew more visible. Crime bosses operated openly in certain neighborhoods, using intimidation and violence to maintain control. Rival gangs fought bloody battles over territory, often with innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. This turf war only helped the cartels strengthen their grip, as they played different factions against each other to stay in power. The influx of cocaine also fueled corruption. The cartels needed protection to keep their operations running smoothly. This meant bribing key figures, dock workers, transport drivers, and even police officers to turn a blind eye or actively assist in the smuggling efforts. These corrupt individuals became vital cogs in the cartel machine, ensuring that shipments passed through without interruption. Liverpool, once a proud symbol of trade and industry, was transforming into a crucial hub for one of the most dangerous criminal enterprises in the world. The cartels had found the perfect gateway, and the consequences would be felt for years to come. The success of Liverpool's cocaine smuggling operations depended heavily on one critical factor: silence. And silence, in this case, came from corruption deep within the very institutions meant to protect the city. As the cartel's influence expanded, a small but powerful group of corrupt police officers began to emerge. These officers, tempted by large sums of money and promises of power, chose to betray their duty. Their actions allowed drug shipments to move through the city's port and streets with alarming ease. These corrupt officers did more than just look the other way. Some actively helped the smugglers by warning them about impending raids or investigations. They leaked confidential information, sabotaged evidence, and even intimidated honest colleagues who sought to crack down on the drug trade. Their involvement turned the city's police force into a double-edged sword: on the surface, fighting crime, but beneath, protecting criminals. The corruption was carefully concealed, making it difficult for outsiders to see the full extent of the problem. Officers involved in smuggling were selective about who they worked with, operating in small, trusted circles. Their influence spread quietly, corrupting not only individual officers but entire units. This created a culture of fear and mistrust within the police force, as honest officers struggled to carry out their duties amid increasing suspicion. The cartels understood the value of these corrupt officers. Paying them off was a small price to keep their multi-million-pound operations safe. With inside help, large shipments of cocaine could enter Liverpool undetected, often hidden in containers alongside legal goods. Even when investigations were launched, the cartel's network of protection meant that evidence disappeared, key witnesses were intimidated, and arrests were rare. This betrayal from within made the police force less effective, and the streets more dangerous. As the drugs flooded Liverpool's neighborhoods, violence increased. Gangs battled not just for territory, but also for control over the corrupt contacts inside law enforcement. This dynamic made it harder to distinguish friend from foe and blurred the lines between crime and justice. The growing corruption created a shadow government in Liverpool, one where criminals operated with near impunity, protected by those sworn to stop them. It was a hidden war fought behind closed doors, threatening the very heart of the city's safety and integrity. Beneath the surface of Liverpool's historic streets, a complex and ruthless network controlled the flow of cocaine from the docks to the neighborhoods. This hidden structure was far more than a simple group of dealers. It was a tightly woven criminal machine, carefully organized to protect the interests of the South American cartels and maximize profits. At every level, loyalty was demanded, and fear was used to maintain control. At the top were the crime lords, figures who operated from the shadows but wielded immense power. These individuals coordinated shipments, managed corrupt contacts, and settled disputes with brutal efficiency. They rarely appeared in public, instead relying on trusted lieutenants to carry out their orders and enforce their will on the streets below. Below the crime lords were the mid-level smugglers and distributors. These men and women acted as the bridge between the docks and the neighborhoods, overseeing the movement of cocaine from hidden warehouses to street dealers. They ensured that shipments were broken down into smaller quantities and that the drugs reached the right hands without drawing unwanted attention. Their role required careful planning and quick decisions, especially when rival gangs threatened to encroach on their territory. Street dealers were the final link in the chain, selling cocaine directly to users and generating the cash flow that kept the operation alive. Many dealers were young and desperate, caught in a cycle of addiction, poverty, and violence. For them, working under the crime lords was both a survival strategy and a dangerous gamble, as loyalty could be punished with swift and deadly consequences. Violence was a constant tool used by the network to maintain order and control. Intimidation, threats, and brutal attacks kept rivals at bay, and warned potential informants of the cost of betrayal. Innocent bystanders often became collateral damage in these conflicts, creating an atmosphere of fear throughout entire neighborhoods. This network didn't just operate in isolation, it was deeply embedded in the community. Some locals turned a blind eye, either out of fear or because they benefited economically from the drug trade. Others became involved, knowingly or unknowingly, as couriers, lookouts, or even enforcers. This created a tangled web that law enforcement struggled to penetrate. Liverpool's streets had transformed into battlegrounds, controlled by crime lords who answered to faraway cartels. Their grip was tight, and the cost of breaking free was high. As the cocaine continued to flow, so did the cycle of violence and corruption, threatening to consume the city from within. In 2005, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source, an anonymous whistleblower within Liverpool's police force who risked everything to expose the truth. This individual, deeply troubled by the corruption and violence consuming the city, secretly gathered evidence of collusion between officers and drug smugglers. Their decision to come forward was not taken lightly. They knew the danger they faced, both from criminal networks and from the very colleagues they once trusted. The whistleblower's information painted a chilling picture. It revealed detailed records of bribes paid to officers, encrypted messages, messages between smugglers and corrupt police, and lists of shipments allowed to pass through the docks unchecked. These documents exposed the deep-rooted betrayal at the heart of law enforcement and showed how the cartel's cocaine flow was protected from within. Once the evidence was handed to a national crime agency, a sense of urgency swept through the investigation. For years, the corrupt officers had operated with near impunity, but now they were in the spotlight. The agency began piecing together the complex web of corruption, following the paper trail to identify those involved at every level. The whistleblower's bravery brought hope but also unleashed a dangerous game of cat and mouse. The cartels and their local allies quickly learned about the leak and launched a desperate hunt for the source. Threats were made, intimidation tactics increased, and the whistleblower's life was put in grave danger. To stay alive, they had to disappear into the shadows, constantly moving and hiding from those who wanted to silence them. At the same time, the internal police investigation faced challenges. Corrupt officers within the force attempted to sabotage the inquiry, destroying evidence and spreading misinformation. The whistleblower's revelations caused mistrust among officers, fracturing the department as honest cops struggled to clean up their ranks. Despite the risks, the whistleblower's actions marked a turning point. For the first time, the true scale of Liverpool's drug corruption was out in the open. Their courage inspired others to come forward, slowly breaking the code of silence that had protected the criminals for so long. But the fight was far from over, and the city braced itself for the dangerous battles still to come. With the whistleblower's revelations in hand, law enforcement agencies launched a bold and secretive sting operation aimed at dismantling the cocaine network embedded in Liverpool. The goal was clear: to cut off the flow of drugs at the source, arrest the key players, and expose the corrupt officers aiding the cartels. However, carrying out such a complex operation in a city riddled with betrayal and danger would prove far from simple. Undercover agents were sent into the heart of Liverpool's criminal world, posing as buyers, smugglers, and insiders. Their mission was to gather intelligence, identify key contacts, and track cocaine shipments from the docks to the streets. Surveillance teams monitored suspects around the clock, using advanced technology to intercept communications and map the sprawling network. The operation was slow and painstaking. Every piece of information had to be verified, and every move carefully planned to avoid alerting the criminals. The agents discovered that the cartel's protection extended beyond the docks. Drivers, warehouse managers, and even some local politicians appeared to be involved. It was clear the corruption was more widespread than initially believed. Despite the careful planning, the operation was plagued by uncertainty. Investigators suspected there were still insiders feeding information back to the cartel. This fear of leaks created an atmosphere of tension and paranoia within the team, as trust became a rare commodity. Meetings were held in secret locations, and communication was limited to reduce the risk of exposure. As the sting gained momentum, several arrests were made, and shipments were intercepted, dealing a blow to the smuggling ring. But just as the net seemed to be tightening, unexpected setbacks occurred. Key suspects disappeared, evidence vanished, and planned raids had to be postponed or altered at the last minute. These disruptions raised alarming questions about the operation's security. Was there a mole inside the law enforcement team? Were the cartels always one step ahead? The stakes grew higher as individuals were able to avoid capture time and again. Major shipments slipped through the port unnoticed. Key suspects vanished without a trace, and carefully laid traps were dismantled before they could spring. The betrayal left the sting operation crippled and exposed the depth of corruption within the police force. This double agent was more than just a mole. They were a powerful link between the cartels and the criminal networks operating on Liverpool's streets. Their influence extended into the highest levels of the investigation, giving the smugglers an almost unfair advantage. The officers' motives remained unclear, whether greed, fear, or loyalty to the criminal world. But the damage was undeniable. The fallout from this betrayal was immediate. Trust within the police department plummeted, and the morale of honest officers took a severe hit. Many feared for their safety, unsure if their colleagues could be trusted. Investigations stalled, and key witnesses withdrew, intimidated by the power of the corrupted officer and their cartel allies. Meanwhile, the cartels seized the opportunity to strengthen their position. Rival gangs used the chaos to expand their control over neighborhoods, leading to a surge in violence and crime. The city's streets became even more dangerous, as law enforcement struggled to regroup and restore order. This betrayal highlighted a brutal truth. The battle against the cocaine trade in Liverpool was not just about stopping shipments or arresting criminals. It was a fight against betrayal from within. The city's future depended on rooting out corruption, rebuilding trust, and confronting the criminals who had embedded themselves deeply into its heart. But with enemies on every side, the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty and danger. After the stunning betrayal within the police force, Liverpool's streets grew more volatile and unpredictable than ever before. The failure of the sting operation left law enforcement weakened and vulnerable, while the criminal network sensed an opportunity to expand their influence without fear of immediate consequences. Violence surged as rival gangs fought fiercely for control over the lucrative cocaine trade and the territories that came with it. Neighborhoods once familiar and safe became battlegrounds, where gunfire, intimidation, and street fights were a daily reality. Innocent residents found themselves caught in the crossfire, forced to live with the constant threat of violence just beyond their doorsteps. Families moved away when they could, but many were trapped in the cycle of poverty and crime that tightened its grip on the city. The surge in gang violence was fueled not only by the struggle for control but also by the breakdown of trust in law enforcement. With corruption exposed and some officers still suspected of collusion, many residents lost faith in the police's ability or willingness to protect them. Calls for help often went unanswered, and witnesses feared coming forward, worried about retaliation from both criminals and corrupt officers. This atmosphere of fear and lawlessness created a dangerous vacuum. Cartels took advantage of the chaos to strengthen their hold on Liverpool's drug routes, recruiting new members and expanding their operations. The drug trade became more aggressive, with dealers pushing cocaine harder on the streets and violence escalating to intimidate those who resisted. Local businesses suffered as customers stayed away, and the city's economy was strained by the increasing crime rate. The historic streets of Liverpool, once symbols of prosperity and resilience, now bore the scars of conflict and neglect. Yet amid the turmoil, a small but determined group of honest officers, community leaders and activists, refused to give up. They worked quietly behind the scenes to rebuild trust, support victims, and push for reform within the police force. Their efforts offered a glimmer of hope that Liverpool could reclaim its streets, but the path to recovery was long and uncertain. The city faced a brutal reality. Until corruption was rooted out and the criminal networks dismantled, Liverpool would remain a city on edge, caught between the shadows of its past and the fight for its future. After years of turmoil and setbacks, Liverpool began to see the first signs of a new dawn in its fight against the cocaine trade and corruption. Public outrage over the exposed scandals had reached a boiling point, forcing both local government and national authorities to take serious action. Independent inquiries were launched to investigate the extent of police corruption, and reforms within the force became a top priority. These investigations led to the arrest and conviction of several high-ranking officers who had been involved in protecting the drugs. Their trials exposed the deep rot within the system, sending shockwaves through the city. The convictions were a clear message that no one, not even those sworn to uphold the law, was above justice. This helped restore some public confidence and gave honest officers the backing they needed to fight back. Alongside these legal actions, a new generation of law enforcement officers was recruited and trained with a focus on transparency, integrity, and community engagement. They worked to rebuild the fractured relationship between the police and Liverpool's residents, holding town hall meetings, partnering with local organizations, and creating outreach programs designed to reduce crime and support victims. International cooperation also played a critical role in weakening the cartel's grip on Liverpool. Authorities collaborated with South American law enforcement to track shipments back to their sources, leading to the disruption of several major cocaine supply lines. By cutting off the flow at its origin, they were able to reduce the volume of drugs arriving in the city. Despite these successes, the fight was far from over. Cartels and criminal networks adapted quickly, finding new ways to smuggle drugs and corrupt officials. The scars left by years of violence and betrayal did not disappear overnight. Communities continued to struggle with the social and economic consequences of the drug trade. However, Liverpool's story was no longer one of defeat. The reforms and arrests marked the beginning of a long-term effort to reclaim the city's streets. The courage of whistleblowers, the determination of honest officers, and the resilience of the community formed the foundation for a future where crime and corruption could be challenged and perhaps one day overcome. Although significant progress was made in breaking the cocaine smuggling networks and exposing corruption, the legacy of those dark years continued to cast a long shadow over Liverpool. The city's transformation from a bustling port to a key gateway for drug trafficking had left deep wounds that affected families, communities, and the city's identity itself. The scars were visible not just in the broken neighborhoods and crime statistics, but in the lingering mistrust between residents and law enforcement. Many people still struggled with the trauma caused by years of violence, fear, and betrayal. Economic hardships, fueled in part by the disruption of local businesses and social services, made recovery slow and challenging. The cycle of addiction, poverty, and crime persisted in some areas, reminding everyone that the fight against drugs was never truly over. Yet, Liverpool's story was also one of resilience and hope. The city began investing in education, rehabilitation programs, and community support initiatives, designed to give young people alternatives to the dangerous world of drugs and gangs. Former dealers and convicts, some who had lost everything, became advocates for change, sharing their stories and helping others avoid the same mistakes. The reforms within the police force continued, emphasizing accountability and transparency. New policies were introduced to prevent corruption, and independent watchdogs monitored law enforcement closely. The lessons learned from Liverpool's ordeal became a blueprint for other cities grappling with similar problems across the UK. Despite these efforts, the cartels remained vigilant, always searching for new routes and opportunities to re-establish their networks. The global nature of drug trafficking meant that the battle was never confined to one city or one country. Liverpool's experience served as a stark warning of how corruption, greed, and desperation could transform even the most historic and proud places into hubs of criminal activity.